Yay, Glenn.
Good morning, everyone.
Hello.
My name is Garrett Sheehan. I'm President and CEO of the Greater New Haven Chamber of Commerce. We'll get started in just a moment. We'll let everyone join in here. We have a great presentation this morning from our Tech Council presented by Comcast Business. We'll be starting in just a moment. And if you're just joining us, we'll get started in just a moment. All right, good morning, everyone. My name is Garrett Sheehan. I'm President and CEO of the Greater New Haven Chamber of Commerce. We appreciate you being on with us this morning. This is our Tech Council that we normally have through our morning mingle or councils and conversations. So we appreciate you joining in this different format with us. And we have our Tech Council presented by Comcast Business. Comcast Business has been a great partner with the Chamber for several years, supporting not only our expo, but so many of the programs that we do. And I know we're all relying on Comcast Business a lot more. So I want to introduce Paul Savis, Vice President of Comcast Business Western New England region, to get us kicked off this morning. Paul, good morning. I think we just lost Paul for a moment, so we'll let him get back on. But while we do that, let me just talk about all of the sponsors that support the Chamber as we go through our period of time right now of obviously being in a much different mode. We have our principal investors and our premier investors as well, and I'll pull those up on the screen as we get Paul back on here in just a moment. You know, it's funny that on the day we do the Tech Council, I would have the most technical difficulties. That probably lines up well. Again, I want to thank our premier investors, also our key investors, and all the principal investors that invest in the Chamber and allow us to do the programming that we're able to put on right now for you as well. I will talk a little bit about our panel as we wait to get Paul back up on here. So we have Amy Bailey, who is with SpearGen, and we're also joined by Glenn McDermott with Red Rock Branding. And when we get to Amy and Glenn, they're going to talk a lot about the different types of platforms that are out there, opportunities for you to work from home. We did have the reopening that occurred on May 20th. But obviously, a lot of people are going to continue to work from home, and this is a new normal. I almost hate using that phrase because we use it probably every day and too much. But it is the way things are going to be. I know for myself, if you hear my kids in the background, I'm going to be stuck here at the house for a little while longer until there's school options for them. And so this way of life of working online and doing this type of programming is here to stay. So I think while we wait for Paul to get back on, maybe I'll let Amy and Glenn, if you want to just kind of introduce the topic, and then we'll see if Paul's back on, and then we can get into the presentation. Amy?
Sure. This topic is one that we feel is relevant to businesses of all sizes. As the Tech Council, we're looking for tools to help different sized businesses and tools that are relevant to our community to help them with problems they're currently experiencing. So with the shutdown, people have been trying to take their meetings virtual, and there's a lot of challenges that come along with that. And we're going to be talking about our two favorite tools. So my favorite is Teams, and Glenn will be talking about Zoom. And we're going to be kind of focusing on those because that's what we found has really helped our businesses to pivot successfully.
Glenn, thank
Yeah,
you for joining us as
Amy.
well.
Yeah, thanks for that setup. Like Amy said, I'm the chair of the Tech Council, and our aim is to provide you guys with some useful education and guidance around how to use technology to enhance your work-life balance, which is such a big topic these days. And so it's going to be more of a series, really, just talking about the future of work, because in many cases, the work that we're doing is now, of course, being done in a different place, but there are also greater impacts around what that work is and can be going forward. So this is the first in a series where we're talking really about getting the most of the video conferencing tools like the one we're on today. And Amy's specialty is, as a Microsoft partner, is using a tool called Teams, which she's going to be talking about. And then Zoom is my preference. We've been using it for a long time. Red Rock, we're a remote first team, so we've been using these tools for many years. So one of the first things I wanted to just share before I hand it over to Amy is really just a bit of a side-by-side on what these tools look like. The heavy hitters in this market used to be Skype, and now, of course, that's a Microsoft property, but it's sort of dropped down in terms of its popularity, whereas Teams and Zoom has sort of come to the top in terms of the most popular tools for reasons that we will unfold in the next 45 minutes. There are many others, but we just wanted to give this a one-pager, which we'll come back to and share. So why don't I hand it over to Amy, and she can talk about her world. Thank you.
Yeah, Glenn, can we change to the next screen? Because I still see the first screen, sorry.
We're going to get Paul on. Hopefully we'll get Paul back up in a few minutes, but we'll definitely move forward with the presentation. And again, thanks everyone for joining us, and excited to hear about the different platforms, because they definitely have made a difference in all of our lives. And it feels like some days I'm on Teams, some days I'm on Zoom. Use them each a little bit of both, as well as some of the other things that are out there. Amy, I'll help Glenn with the slides. If you wanted to maybe just start talking through it, and we can get those. We'll try to get those up while you're talking.
Yeah, it's fine. So one thing that I want to emphasize about Teams versus some of the other platforms that are out there, Teams is an application that you download, and Teams is not just calling. So you're hearing a lot about Teams calls, and people really like those, but Teams is a much more comprehensive application. And the concept of Teams is for Microsoft to have all of your apps you typically use in the Microsoft suite accessible in one place. So it's kind of like a dashboard. And the idea eventually of where it's going, thank you very much, is that you are not going to need all these separate apps. I'm going to give you a little background about SpearGen. So like Glenn, we are primarily remote in our workforce, and we do blended shore, which makes applications like Teams really important for us to be able to work with our clients here in the United States, and also for our employees to communicate with each other. So as you see, we have 65 employees, and right now we are all operating on Teams, and it's really helping us with our projects as well as our internal communications. And we are really experienced in cloud development. So going off of that, we mainly work in applications. So we build custom apps from scratch, and we also come in and take over existing applications. So for a company like us, when we're evaluating a new application to use for our own purposes, we really put it through the ringer and look at all of the positive pros and cons and potential problems when we're evaluating it. So I want to share some of the things we found with you, and then also how we're using Teams. So like I said, Teams, it's like a virtual desktop, and it's really focused on instant collaboration. So when you're file sharing in Teams, you're able to work on files live with other people. And that's something Microsoft has been working on a long time, and something that the Google Suite used to be much stronger on. But say I'm chatting with someone or on a call with somebody and I share a file, there's a potential that you can actually live edit that file during the call, and you can both be typing. With the chat, you can actually chat. You can have a group chat or a one-on-one chat. And it also integrates with your calendar and Outlook. So you'll see your calendar there. And the idea is I don't have to toggle between different apps anymore. I'm really working based in Teams. The other neat feature, and one of the key ways we're using it, is the project management sort of stuff. So for each project, you have a team of those team members, and all those team members can communicate within the channel. So if there's something that we all need to review, somebody can post it on the channel, and then we all get to look at it within the application. And then, of course, the main thing we're talking about today is the calls. And the calls is really the part that I found extremely useful, and we're going to talk a little bit more about that. You can go, yeah. Part of the reason that I wanted to talk about Teams right now, it's incredibly relevant. In 3 months, it went from 20 million to 44 million users, and that was as of mid-March, and it's continued to climb till then. They estimate it's like up to 70 million now, and it just continues to rise. It's only been around for 2 years, and yet we're seeing 91% of the Fortune 100 companies using it. So even if you're a small business, though, you'll see there's a reason why these companies are using Teams, and it's incredibly applicable to even the smallest organizations as well. One other thing on that slide, sorry. There are 44 languages supported on Teams, and they just released recently a translate feature. So if you are Teams chatting with somebody in another language, they just hit translate and they can read it in whatever language they're signed into. That's a new feature, and that's really unique to the chat. Okay, next slide, thank you. So there's a few things that Teams does really well that made us go with it, and our clients also like these features as well. So if you live in Microsoft Office, so if you're creating Excel spreadsheets, if you're constantly uploading stuff to SharePoint and OneDrive to share it, if you've been doing Skype for business calls, you now just have all of that in one place. And that is honestly quite convenient, especially with so many upload speeds getting hit by the lack of bandwidth that a lot of people are experiencing, just a high demand. Putting a document in Teams seems to go faster than uploading it to SharePoint or OneDrive. Another thing that's really cool is your calendar from Outlook is integration. So you can just click in your calendar. You don't ever have to leave Teams. And if you have Teams calls, you see a little icon that says join in your calendar, and you just click join. There's no clicking back and forth and opening each invite for a link. It's all right there for you. There's also add-ons available for other apps, like Planner is one that we really like. That allows you to put tasks into a Teams channel, so you can have project tasks, and those can be assigned to certain people, and the project manager can assign them, and that person then sees the task pop up with a notification telling them that they need to complete it. And then Remote Assist, which is something we have been using for a very long time, but has just recently become available to the mainstream. It is sort of an add-on to Teams that works on your phone or a HoloLens headset, and you can actually allow the caller to draw on the other person's video surroundings. So if I have a video call going, and let's say I'm having a problem with a piece of equipment, I can call my manager who's at home because of the lockdown, and they can actually draw on my equipment, see the equipment, show me a video of how to fix it, and verbally direct me. So it's a next-gen video call, really. And then the other thing is the security is fairly tight. The security for Teams, I do want to mention, it's about how you configure it. There are some advanced settings that you can turn on. And there's also some that you can make it not as secure if you have a lot of guest users. You can go to next, thank you. So how we've used it. So this is a little inside scoop for you all. This is how we're using it with our clients. So each client actually gets their own dedicated Teams channel. So in the sort of Teams feature, you can add a guest. So we have each client in their own Teams. Our staff assigned to that client or project are on that channel as well. That's where we share the project plan. And we also use calls and chats within that team as well. So there's actually ability to hit meet now within a chat. So if you're ever going back and forth with somebody, you just hit meet now and you can instantly do a call. The client loves this. Like, a lot of our clients are really excited. At first they're nervous, but once they're in there, they get that 24-hour access feeling. And because we have so many people in different time zones, it really helps us to feel more connected together. And the team, especially in India and US, we are really enjoying this because there's fewer meetings and more direct communication. If I have a quick question, we don't necessarily have to jump on a meeting for that. We can discuss it in a team and then decide if we need to meet on it or if it's just a yes, no sort of thing. For the calls, we've had very good luck with the calls with high quality video and audio. The share screen functionality has also recently changed. So you're now allowed to do a one window selection. And you can also blur and add your own background, similar to how Zoom works. The key difference here is this doesn't require an i7, which is a type of more advanced computer processor. You can use this functionality on a much lower grade computer. You can also invite outside users to your teams and only assign them to specific channels. And calls, you can do a call with somebody who's not even a Teams member. They're able to just click the link and join in a web browser or in their own app. So you don't always have to add everybody to your Teams environment. And we've done calls up to 50 plus people globally. And we've had very few audio drops on those calls. So that's been very successful for us. So there are a couple of problems with Teams. I don't want to glaze over. You know, there are a couple of issues that you'll run into. If somebody has a very old computer or a not smartphone, Teams might give them some challenges as far as it's really made for more modern computers. I would say 5 years or younger is probably preferred, just because the notifications and the size of the application. And then obviously smartphones are definitely what you need for Teams. There's not a dial-in phone number. People who don't use Office at all, there's really no point to doing Teams aside from the calling. If you're not using like Word and Excel, you're not going to get the most out of it. So it can be good for meetings, but it's not going to be fully beneficial. You can also get some glitches if the security settings aren't adjusted correctly. So you have to manually set the settings for your channels or have a company-wide policy set up so that you can decide if you want to allow out-of-company users or if you don't. And you can always manually override to add those out-of-company users. But yeah, you have to kind of adjust them. It comes out of box fairly, like when you first get it, it's fairly restrictive. But you do want to check the settings, and I can definitely help people with that if they need. The other thing is notifications aren't automatic. So just because you're in a team doesn't mean you're going to get a message. You actually have to turn notifications on. And then the UI is comprehensive. So if you are using Teams and you're having your whole company on Teams, please train them. There's a lot of things there that can be highly beneficial, but if people don't know how to use it, then they're not going to use them. And that's just my contact info. Feel free to reach out to me if you have any questions about Teams. If you're using it or you're not sure if it's a good fit, I'm more than happy to have a conversation about that.
Great, thank you, Amy. And we'll come back to you with questions. And before we get to Glenn, I want to welcome back Paul. We lost Paul for a moment there. Sorry about that, Paul. But thank you again for joining us. And Paul Savas is Vice President for Comcast Business for Western New England region. Paul.
Hey, Garrett, and good morning, everybody, and really appreciate the opportunity to bring this great information to all of you. And it's interesting, you know, we're having this webinar about working from home, and just about as Garrett was opening the call, my screen froze up. I thought it was on Garrett's end, and I'm scrambling all around my house and found that my wife had just finished a Zoom-based exercise class, and when she was unplugging her laptop, power was lost to our modem. So leave it to the cable guy to have the issue, right? On behalf of the 1,200 Connecticut-based Comcast Business and Xfinity employees, I'm really excited that we're able to bring you this information and know that all of you are just incredibly showing flexibility in how you're operating your businesses, your homes and your families, and hope that you're all well and safe. I know on our end, it was incredible that we transitioned 1,200 call center and inside sales workers in the state of Connecticut home in a matter of 8 days. So we're all in this same boat together, and we're looking forward to being able to support those businesses. We start the restart in Connecticut, and just thrilled with the efforts of our teams to keep everybody up and running. And for all of you Comcast subscribers that are Xfinity customers at your homes, I'm just thrilled to know the response we've had in keeping your networks up and running there as well. So thanks again for the opportunity, and back to you, Garrett.
And Paul, while I have you, I mean, the usage must be through the roof from where you guys were beforehand with so many people doing calls and video calls. And it's been seamless. How have you guys been able to handle that?
It's almost 2.5 times normal usage. So our network organization has been out doing what are called node splits to enhance our network. So there's more capacity to each and every node that serves all of our residential and business customers. And, you know, we saw a big spike right around that last week of March, working with our larger institutions to be able to go and upgrade their bandwidth to accommodate their at-home workforces, as well as working with all of our healthcare institutions for all that they've had to do in such a short period of time.
And Paul, one last thing too, and I think it's just been so impressive that Comcast Business has done, and just trying to get accessibility out to more of our socially affected communities, definitely with so many students who may not have had internet connections. I know the company's done a lot to be able to provide that, so that students could connect with schools and families can connect either with work or other families.
Yeah, that's a great point. Thank you for mentioning that, Garrett. Our Comcast Internet Essentials program, which is for income-constrained families that qualify for the federal student lunch program, made some provisions to lower some of the parameters as far as what was the ability, if any families had past due balances, making the service free for 2 months, to open that up to be able to facilitate all of the online learning of our students. It was just an incredible partnership.
Well, thank you, Paul. We appreciate you doing that and everything that Comcast Business does for the Chamber. So thank you very much.
My pleasure.
Now we're going to turn back to Glenn. And Glenn, I believe I'll get the screen up here and let you take the presentation from there.
Thank you, Garrett, and it's a pleasure to be sharing a screen with you all this morning. I do miss our familiar handshakes and so on, but it's incredible what we've done as a collective community in the last few months to pivot to quite dramatically, and using the technology thankfully supplied by Paul Savas and his company. And I appreciate the 2.5 times the pipe value there too. But and it's interesting, Amy, I really enjoyed your story about your product and being Microsoft sort of enterprise friendly. And I think what we'll learn from Zoom is that it's more perhaps suits the people that aren't in the Microsoft suite. I'm a Mac user, so I'm more leaning into the Google suite and all of the Mac OS. And so you probably find that the Zoom product might be more suitable for that. like I said, Red Rock Branding, I'm the CEO. We do branding with purpose. We're based in New Haven. Been enjoying a long collaboration with the Chamber. Chair of the Tech Council, chair of the organising committee for the Big Connect. So all of these things are important to the way we operate as a team, and hopefully we can share some of that today and have a Q&A with you. So let's move on if we can, Garrett. Thank you. This was a great screenshot I grabbed this week because not that I'm interested in the market cap size of Zoom at all, but just an incredible pivot in the community, the business community, as to what has shrunk in value and what has boomed. And Zoom, which most people didn't know about a year ago, is now equivalent to those airlines in cap size. So I'm not sure what the user numbers are. Daily meeting participants, 300 million. So it's clearly become a most popular tool and bumped out of the way previous tools like Skype and even Uber Conference, which is one tool that I was using. So let's explore some of the reasons why that's the case. I guess the biggest sort of shift for me is the shift in the work culture, really. I mean, luckily we've been a remote first company for nearly 10 years. So even though we are New Haven based, there are still many team members that are outside the state. So we've been using these tools for some time, and we've really enjoyed the flexibility of it because it's a great scheduling tool, and it saves so much time commuting, and you can improve employee retention because they can have a better work-life balance and those kind of things. So the remote working is beneficial in many ways, and I know a lot of traditional organizations have struggled with the shift to remote working, and but like I said, we've all sort of been learning together in this journey. So let's look at some of the other aspects of Zoom that might appeal. I guess the benefits, really, I just picked it up and used it straight away. I didn't have to go through any particular training, and it's, I guess, become so widely adopted that, like Google, it's become the verb, you know. The screen share options and co-hosting and the different admin roles that you can assign are really helpful to organizers to give people different permissions to do different things. They have a ton of free training that's set up. It's mobile friendly. I was on a call with Ray yesterday, and he had to transition from desktop to mobile, and that was an easy flip midway to the call. Thankfully, it does adjust to bandwidth and the shift in bandwidth. And earlier on in the call, I was getting the warning that the presentation was paused. So that's what it was doing, and Garrett picked it up straight away. So thanks for that pickup, Garrett. What I find, because we're doing a lot of webinars as Garrett is doing with the Chamber, is that it scales easy from Zoom Rooms, which is the $15 a month tool, into the webinars, and that's the that transition I'm finding useful because a lot of our clients are having to do the same thing. They all had events booked in the summer and the fall, and we've now had to flip into virtual events too. So the fact that Zoom is a smooth transition in that, I think is really useful. The functionalities of chat, Q&A, polling, and breakout rooms make it for an engaging thing. This is not, I want to get this sort of presentation piece out of the way and talk to you guys and hear about the challenges you're having with these tools, but it's more about how you can engage with your community, and those tools I found really useful. The plugins, it connects with Zapier plugins, so you've got a huge suite of plugins with all sorts of tools like HubSpot and other CRM applications, so it does have that smooth transition. And the recording chat, and you can do transcripts are fully downloadable at the end too, so you can offer that as a way of taking the minutes of the meeting and so on. But it does have a few downsides. Next slide, thank you, Garrett. One that we've all heard a lot about lately is the security. And the CEO admits plainly that he was taken a little bit by surprise, like everyone else was, with this work remote thing. So there were a few gaps in the security settings, and I just got an update this morning of a 5.0. So I think they feel caught up with that. I have heard from different friends who are operating the Microsoft suites that their user screens and so on are quite different. So the training around that is a bit of a challenge. I appreciate what Amy said about Microsoft product having the virtual backgrounds, because the Zoom has a very high requirement, a twin 4-core processor to make the backgrounds functional, and I tried using a green background again, that was quite wonky too. So if you're into that kind of stuff, which I am, so maybe I should be using Teams. But like everyone else, we're all missing the fun stuff. We're all missing the random sort of unplanned conversations that makes our social work life interesting. I was at a store this morning and I watched this store employee do a really funny thing, and I was wearing a mask and clearly she didn't see my smile. So, you know, we're all feeling that sort of disconnection. But the fact that we can all sit here in the same room this morning without masks and share these kind of moments is a benefit as well. How we use it as a group, we do all our meetings, obviously internal and external with clients. We've worked a bunch of different formats, and this is the fun part. We can do virtual town halls, the more intimate fireside chats, the speaker series. So we've been playing around with the webinar functionality in different formats and really having some fun with it. Like, we're all new to this relatively, but we have had to flip from our clients' events into virtual events. So we're doing a brand launch in June where we expect 500 attendees. And then later on in the year, another client, the APT Foundation, are doing their 50th anniversary gala. And then, of course, I'm also the chair of the Big Connect steering committee at the Chamber, and we are very much considering the possibility that it may be an online virtual event or a blended event. So we are working around best practices in all of that. So they're the kind of the ways that we've been able to use it, and we're getting quite comfortable with the functionality of it now. And if you are interested, we are doing every other Wednesday a workshop around how to deliver these virtual experiences. And so that's a 1-hour webinar that we run online, and we'd be happy to pick up from here. So I think there's a contact page to follow, and we'd love to hear from you in terms of Q&A, how you're using it, the troubles you're having, and other tools that you might want to recommend as well. So I think it's over to you, Garrett. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Glenn. And thank you, Amy. And Glenn's exactly right. If you have questions, put them in the chat. I'll start us off with a couple of questions because, as you pointed out, Glenn, we're using this at the Chamber all of the time. Maybe, Amy, maybe I'll start with you. I've been on a decent amount of Teams calls, and one thing that frustrates me is that you can only have 4 people in the screen. Is that true, or is there another way to change that setting?
So they updated that yesterday, so now you can go 9 in the screen, but it is, yeah, it's constantly updating. But yes, it is more limited than Zoom as far as how many people you can see, and there's no ability to spotlight anyone, which is something we really wish they had done. So we're waiting for that feature. To actually be able to spotlight just somebody that you're talking to on the screen would be fantastic.
You know, and staying on Teams, when I first got into Teams or started using it probably 3 months ago, before all this, it really struck me that it was very close to Slack in the ability to create different channels. And it was only once this occurred that I really realized about the video component. But for people who aren't familiar with Slack, maybe you could just talk about how that kind of community sharing app process.
Yeah, so the basic concept of Slack was to have a dashboard to communicate. So instead of sending emails or doing calls, you can just send each other messages and their group. So you can create a channel for each user group or each project. Microsoft Teams is directly copying the Slack model, and Slack's totally okay with that, obviously. And they're actually planning to do some integration for calling as well. But that method is really popular for software development. But a lot of other industries now, we're seeing healthcare is using a lot of these types of solutions because they're trying to keep their teams safe. Companies with alternating shifts, education, a lot of them are adapting things like Slack or Teams just because they know they're going to have a split workforce with 50% capacity. So their meetings have to be split. So it's a really nice way to do your meetings.
That's good points. Glenn, this is something we, I won't say struggle with, but we kind of see it as the next level with doing webinars. And, the format we're using is great, but when people are looking to make even more formalized, presentation overall, so graphics, use video types of introductions, things like that. That's not part of the basic package with Zoom, but what would you recommend to people if they want to kind of take their virtual experiences up to the next level?
Well, if the short answer is a lot of the things that you can do, you can pre-record. So, if you're running a virtual event, one of the, as we know, Garrett, when we do these, the Big Connect, there's a lot of pressure around getting the people there, the logistics, the food, the timing, the technology. So that's all of the logistical challenges that we are familiar with in terms of running a live event. What I'm discovering, and this has been a great sort of reveal, I guess, today, is that so many of those logistical challenges are kind of moot because you don't have to deal with any of those issues with the people, and the people that are attending don't have to deal with all the logistics of getting there. So those two sort of buckets of convenience have really made this, I think, a big shift from events to flip to the Zoom. And we all know it's not perfect. We all know that, like I said, when I go to a conference, some of the most interesting conversations I've had have been in the sideway, in the hall, unplanned, unstructured, and completely random. And of course, this technology doesn't allow that at all. So although you can still have chats, you can still identify with speakers on the call that you say, hey, I want to pick up and have a connect with on LinkedIn or whatever. All of those things are still, easy to cherry pick from it. But one of the best things I found, and just working on this event with the NHMA, as you're probably aware, the event we're working on was usually a sit-down dinner for 400 people, and now it's flipped to a midday 90-minute presentation. We're going to do the brand reveal and all that stuff, and getting some of those speakers to pre-record their message very authentically and tailored to the event gives us the opportunity to actually bring more people into the conversation. Number one, they maybe couldn't attend before, or maybe they're in the wrong time zone, or for whatever reason. So there are certain benefits that we've discovered that have actually made these events much more appealing to both the organizers and the attendees.
Glenn, I'll stick with you on this, and Amy, feel free to chime in. A lot has been in the news about the security of Zoom, and I know you mentioned it in your slides. When people ask me about it, I've kind of broken it into two categories, and you can tell me if I'm right or wrong on this. The one category is this Zoom bombing that we hear about, and I guess the way I look at that is not so much a security breach. That's more when you've just put out an invitation and a link, and it's public and anyone can jump on it. So different than the normal kind of someone hacked into your computer or something like that. It's just a uninvited guest. But there are some security issues with how Zoom interacts with different platforms that are of a more enterprise level that I think has impacted maybe large corporations or things like that. But can you speak to that a little bit?
Yeah, I think there was a sort of a surge of those incidents that you mentioned, and which I'm puzzled. They trouble me. I don't really understand the intention there, but still. They're always a result of people that were publishing the link publicly without setting the passcode requirement. So it's a very basic setting in your Zoom meeting settings. And if you can make it in a way that people must register and they must use the passcode, then, which is what we do, then I haven't had any problems with these Zoom bombing events. I think people have learned that to make the meetings all registration required is an important part, as you would do anything else. So yeah, I've never had any experience, but I do know people that have, and it's just been quite obscene and quite random and quite nonsensical. So I'm not really sure what the motivation is.
Another question for both of you, and I'll start with Amy, is just online webinar etiquette. And maybe webinar is the wrong term. When we're doing meetings, one of the problems you'll see a lot of times is everyone has their mic on, or people are unaware of their mic being on. I guess the advice is turn your mic off when you enter one of these, but just thoughts. I know in my experience, sometimes if it's a lot of people, I'll make it a webinar as opposed to a meeting to try to address that. But any comments, thoughts you guys have?
Yeah, a key one that if for businesses, when you're trying to do a meeting with a client and you have your internal team on, there's two things we found that really help. First of all, before the meeting, make sure you share an agenda internally with who is talking about which points. When you're in the same room, it's much easier. Just everyone looks at the person and they know they're supposed to talk. So make sure you know who's speaking on each point. And then during the meeting, use people's names to ask them a direct question. Don't just ask a broad general question of your internal team or the client. Make sure they know who you're asking the question to. That really helps, because otherwise you have one of two things: nobody unmutes and nobody talks, or everyone unmutes and they all talk over each other. So making sure you use names and tell people when you're talking to them, and making sure you know who's speaking on which things. It's just professional. And I think that's a really key thing we're finding that we have to do, and our clients are starting to get into that as well.
Yeah, from a Zoom perspective, it's all in the settings, and you can default to say that you want to silence everyone on entry, which is of course a safe place to go for both participants and speakers. And from a sort of etiquette point of view, I know that this has been a big move for everybody. So everybody's still trying to get used to the idea of staring at a screen most of the day. And in some cases, because the camera is in a different place to who your speakers are, there's a disorientation effect with the eye contact. So we don't feel like we're getting that sort of intimate connection as we would if we're all in another room. But I tell you, some of the benefits, which for me outweigh all those, is that it's a leveler. Everybody is at the same level. There's no big, tall, noisy person that gets the major share of the conversation. There's no head of the table. There's none of those sort of traditional hierarchical configurations that are common in boardroom settings or meeting settings. And for me, that's got a wonderful sort of democratic sort of feel to it, and that we're all on the same level. And even for people that have anxiety around speaking in public or speaking to large numbers of people, I've heard that they're much more comfortable talking to their camera because there's none of that anxiety. And so I appreciate the way that it gives people with those sort of social anxieties, again, an equal playing field, just as a technology, whatever it is. So there are some benefits that I think, and my neighbour works for Goldman Sachs in Manhattan, and they're always about, well, you must come to the office because the office is what the brand is, and nobody works remote. And of course now they've all figured out that you can, and in many cases people prosper because they have a better work-life balance. Gary, give you big cheers for homeschooling the kids and doing that at the same time. I really give you a kudos for that. So I know it's not everyone has dealt with this shift in unfair proportions, but overall, I think a lot of people are going to realise that they can do an enormous amount of their business from the convenience of their homes, which has so many more beneficial, ripple effects, in the community.
Let me, we'll wrap up in a moment, but one last question around video backgrounds. And I know Glenn touched a little bit on the virtual backgrounds, but I think something a lot of people struggle with is, what is my background behind me? My wife sometimes will see these videos and she's like, I can't believe you were in that room, or she thinks this looks like a spaceship, even this is our kitchen. You know, and so I've moved around at different spots. Sometimes it's where I can have the most command and control of children. But just what would you say about having a background from your home? Some people have done a really good job of branding, putting their logo, company logo behind them. What are your guys' thoughts on it?
If I can just jump in, Amy, because I've got a strong view on this. I really like it. I really like the fact that I can see Garrett in his kitchen, because for me, now I know where Garrett lives. Kind of it adds a layer of understanding about you to me. So the fact that and you shift things around to work around the kids, I think is kind of funny. And so I've seen pets and stuff. Usually I've got 2 cats snoozing in the couch behind me. They've become part of my Zoom repertoire as well. So so in many ways I've got to know people more intimately through having a real background. But you're right, virtual background is a tool that can add additional layers of branding and purpose and flavor to change it up. How do you feel? All right, go. What do you think, Amy?
Yeah, I completely agree. I mean, I'm in a similar boat to Garrett. And before this, I don't think any of my clients and most of my coworkers had never seen my daughter. And now, unfortunately, most of them have at some point seen my daughter or my dog. I do my best right now. For example, I'm in like the corner of the house with 2 doors between me and the other members. And that's why I'm here. Of course, I think your idea of branding my background is super cool, but choosing somewhere for me that is quiet and it does rotate is really the key right now, just for sanity.
Well, thank you both. It's a great conversation, because these are things that we're all thinking about as we operate in this style, and definitely I think even as we get back to offices, pieces of this that were extremely effective are going to continue to be a part of the workplace. So I want to thank the Tech Council, especially Glenn, and also we have a new liaison for the Tech Council, Glenn Archer. So if you're interested in getting involved in the Tech Council, reach out to either of the Glens. They're separated by the number of N's in their name. Glenn with 2 N's is the one who works at the chamber. But both can get you involved in the Tech Council, as well as Amy. So thank you both. And again, thank you to Comcast Business and Paul for everything they do, especially being our presenting sponsor of the Tech Council. Hope everyone has a great day, a great Memorial Day holiday, and we'll see you next week. We have our Councils and Conversations next Wednesday. And speaking of virtual meetings, Glenn brought it up. On June 16th, we have our annual Healthcare and Life Science Awards event. It's going to be on June 16th. It's going to be completely virtual, so we're entering into a whole new phase, and we're going to see how that works out. But thank you again, and Paul, thank you. We really do appreciate it. Take care, everyone.
Thank
Thank
you.
you. Thanks, Gary.
Bye.